Welcome to Transforming Work with Sophie Wade, exploring the future of work. Find out what's going on in our multi-generational distributed organizations. With a new tech and talent focus, discover what you need to know to stay upskilled and relevant and ensure your business keeps its competitive edge.
Hi! This episode is about learning, discovering new ways to operate your business, and design work with intention. Learning from existing models outside your industry to explore new concepts and ideas. Learning from others, your peers, teammates, and people outside your field. And learning from yourself. Where do you excel? Where do you undermine your own performance and progress? I'm delighted to be learning and sharing learnings from Stephen Puri, founder and CEO of the Sukha company. The Sukha company helps remote workers overcome procrastination and distraction so they can be focused, happier, and healthier. Stephen is also an Academy Award-winning CGI effects producer and has produced many popular Hollywood movies. Hi, Stephen. How are you?
I'm very good, Sophie. How are you?
I am very well, and we have a lot to cover. Diving right in, you studied journalism and business administration. Why?
This is very true. Yes, I went to USC. My degrees are journalism and business, right? I will tell you this. One of the more interesting parts of my life is that every good thing has been a left turn that has dropped in my lap, and I have tried to make the best of it. Be like, okay, how do I turn this into what I want, right?
Okay.
So I'll tell you this. I came to Los Angeles technically because USC offered me a bunch of money and said, hey, if you want to be in broadcast journalism, da, da, da. The funny thing is, when I was in Virginia, where I grew up, both my parents were engineers. They met at IBM. Literally, they worked at the same IBM plant. My mom was a software engineer. My dad is a hardware engineer. My dad designed logic chips and CPU chips. Right?
What a match made in heaven.
They totally were. And my mom was a very talented software engineer. She'd been in the Department of the Navy and then IBM.
Oh.
So I grew up with my mom basically teaching me how to code.
Oh.
Now, I left turn, was randomly at this TV station for an unrelated thing and got invited to be on a TV show as a newscaster. They're like, you seem like you would be great for this youth show. It was the top rated youth show in the DC Baltimore market.
All right.
I did that for 69 weeks. USC was like, oh, we have this great journalism school. If you want to be a broadcast journalist, come here, blah, 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 right? So I was living these two lives of like, I loved coding, but suddenly I was on TV and it was kind of fun to be like recognized when you're like, you know, in your teens, restaurants and stuff, right?
So you also seem that you were like a go with the flow kind of guy. Somebody says, yeah, journalism. You're like, okay.
I would like to say there's some master plan here. It is more like, what happened today? How can I make something of this? Okay.
I love it.
Let's be honest.
Yep.
Like, the answer to your question, the left turn is, so here I am coding and digging it, right?
Yep.
And also doing this like little TV show where USC says, oh, you want to come out? IBM, where my parents worked, they offer a scholarship called the Thomas J. Watson Scholarship. I won that.
Nice.
So part of that is not just money while you're in school. They do pay, cash, but it is if you want a job, you can always have a job.
Okay.
So I made money while I was in school by programming at IBM as a junior software engineer. The same time going to USC. At USC, what is famous part of USC is they have probably arguably the best cinema school, right?
Okay.
Right. And there's fantastic schools, NYU, UCLA, right? So I'm there and happened to be, luckily, the moment when film went digital. Guess who could talk to an engineer, but also could talk to someone creatively? Me. And it was a very small set of people that kind of were in that intersection of that Venn diagram, if you will, right?
Right.
So I'm there and start working in digital film.
You get into CGI in a big way. You come out of college, that's what you decide to do. And then obviously that really takes sort of control of like your interest and your time.
It completely does. So that was when I started working as a junior senior at that ad agency doing the trailers and music videos and stuff for movies, right? that was the entree into like, oh, I'm meeting a whole bunch of people at studios. I'm meeting, and my friends from USC, a lot of them were young, aspiring filmmakers and writers and directors and stuff, right? So something that's part of like the restaurants you're going to and the parties you're going to and the friends you're hanging out with and what you're talking about, right? And going to late movies on Friday night, going to the midnight showing and then staying up debating, what was good or bad about them, right? So it was super fun.
It's because it's work in LA. I lived in LA for 4 years, and you have to pay attention. You have to see all the movies. You have to discuss them.
God.
It's really interesting.
Yes. It's so true. There was a demand for people to help make films that understood computers because until that point, it had been optical, right?
Right.
So I was there. Silicon Graphics was a huge company at the time. They were making big, chunky hardware that could manipulate film frames, right? Now you could do it on your MacBook.
Yeah.
But at the time, it was like you needed a lot of steel to do that. So I did that. I met Roland and Dean when Independence Day was this shitty sci-fi movie. It was like a B movie at Fox.
Okay.
There was not enough money. There was not enough time. And it was just like, hey, man, the guys who did Stargate are doing this movie. And they really needed someone to help with the digital effects. Okay. Well, I happen to know that. At the time, I'd done a bunch. I was very lucky that the kind of movies I did, I worked with Jim Jarmusch and Woody Allen, whom you wouldn't traditionally associate with visual effects, as well as I did Braveheart, did True Lies with Cameron, did Seven with Fincher. So I'd worked with some great directors who could pay our fees because it was expensive to do, right?
Right.
So when I was doing Independence Day and actually work on the production with them, we had a great time. As you know, we won the Academy Award for the visual effects. A rising tide lifts all boats. I happen to be working around very smart people, which makes you look good just by reflecting their brilliance, right? So Roland and Dean and I, as we were posting Independence Day, were, you're working there, you're basically living together at the post-production, right?
Yeah.
So they said, you know what? Why don't we start a company together? We spent maybe $15-ish million on digital effects on this movie. It saved our butt. We did the third act of the movie. The third act of the movie is digital and was not planned to be digital because we had to re-choreograph it because the early screenings did not go well, right? And there's no time to do it practically. So we re-choreographed that digitally. And they said, why don't the three of us start a company together? So we did. Raised, in the teens of millions. And I did that through my mid-20s. We sold that company, Das Werk, sort of like Liberty Media of Germany. They came and made us a great offer. So it was a 6x return for our investors. I thought, oh my God, building a company is so easy. This is so great. When you're young and you think you know everything and like everything's easy. I was like, oh, I'm 28. So I took 2 years off and just traveled. My girlfriend was a flight attendant for her friends. And it just took 2 years to figure out what it is I wanted to do before I turned 30. And
so some reflection first on that particular time of your life. There was a really interesting article in 2014 about the Hollywood production model. That's when we were first sort of talking more about project work and sort of distributed leadership and distributed authority. And so the article was talking about the fact that is the Hollywood production model where all these different specialists come together for production, very high level, incredible, extraordinary combination of creatives and project management people.
On a good movie, yes.
On a good movie. And then there's that sort of mysterious je ne sais quoi. And that was a model that had been proven over and over again to create great outcomes. Yeah. Not all the time.
Yeah.
But as we saw more projects coming and, in 2021, HBR saying the project economy has arrived. So this was part of that beginning sort of ramp up. What were you learning from, or what did sort of in reflection and when you started your own company, having been working on these big and successful Hollywood projects and successful movies, that then when you started up your company, because that, as it starts, has many aspects of that. And as you're sort of building also with a technology thread, which means you're, pivoting, adjusting, trying to sort of understand how the technology is developing as well as the company.
Let me give a very serious and hopefully helpful framework for the things that I can share, because I very much wanted to share some concrete principles that I saw and then probably illustrate them with some stories that are engaging, because film is kind of fun. It's a very specific kind of work. So this, I think, will help frame what I have to share, which is when I had gotten into film, and as you know, by 2010, I'd been an executive vice president on the DreamWorks lot, a vice president at Fox. I'd run the Die Hard series, the Wolverine, stuff like that, right? So a job that from the outside, a lot of people could be envious of, like, oh, wow, you're senior executive of studio. You're like, and at the end of the day, for the studio, it is soap. You're selling soap, right? It just happens to be glamorous soap, but it is soap. It's marketed this way. It's this kind of budget. We crank them out every year. It's great, right? So here's the thing that I noticed when I got back into tech. When I had that moment where I was like, I'm going to wake up, be 40 years old, and be like the guy making Die Hard 9, telling his kids, Daddy's got to go to work and earn your college tuition. He's making Die Hard 9, Bruce in the retirement home.
Hang on a second. Look, Fast and the Furious, we're on 14 now? I mean, what number are we on? But I'll tell you, there are worse things you could have been doing.
I still have friends where you may have seen Ant-Man 2. They have this script for Ant-Man 5 that they're working on because 3 is already in production, maybe in post. 4 is about to shoot. It's in prep. 5 they have a script for. And it's, it may not be noble work, but it's like, hey, man, I got 3 kids. There's definitely that moment of, you know what? I'm going to wake up and be that guy who is cranking out Ant-Man 7. And I don't know that changes the world in any positive way. And I don't know it's something when my children are old enough to understand what work is and what daddy does, that they're going to be like, oh my God, that's so amazing what you did. And so I got back into tech because it was something I knew right agency. I may fail. I may not be part of a multi-billion-dollar News Corp or a DreamWorks and Universal or Sony, but I can make decisions. I can live or die by my decisions, right?
Right.
So I did 2 small tech companies, raised about $3 million, give or take, for each company.
Yeah.
And both failed. Both were, great experiences of like, let me try this. Definitely the smartest thing I did was when I hit the moment with each company where I was like, okay, I shouldn't raise more money because we've tried everything and it's not succeeding. Like one company got to about 60,000 monthly actives, but we never hit that inflection point where the next morning that was 100,000 and 300, you know what I mean? Yeah. So I did this one thing, which I offer people in case it's helpful for anyone as they process some sort of defeat or some sort of hard learning, is I sat in this one chair that I have that's right by the window, and then on a legal pad, like old school pad with pencil, muscle memory, I wrote to myself, what are the things I learned before I forget? Because I know in a month they'll become more distant, and in a year I was like, what is the stuff I did wrong? Right. And I wrote that out longhand bullets, right? Number 1 bullet was, I thought I was right. Right? There was definitely a culture of, oh my God, Steve Jobs was a visionary, and who could have predicted, the iPhone? Who could,
right.
You would have just asked for, faster horses and carriages, but I made the car, like that kind of mentality.
Yeah.
And big note to myself, I was like, you need to listen more. Shut the F up and listen. And when people are trying to give you advice, it is your job to sift through and find the signal in the noise, but not to be like, oh, no one gets it. Like, I have a vision for this. Right. So there's some lessons like that. And this ties back because in doing those companies, which I did entirely remote companies, and we went into the pandemic with this, right? Where suddenly a lot of companies were forced into work from home, work remote, whatever you want to call it, right? And that was something where they were like caught back on their heels, like, oh my God, what are the tools to do? Like, we all need to have Zoom account. Like that was like the thing. Like, how do we get together? How do we do? And here's the thing is not a lot of people have run movies before, have been either senior executive at studio or produced films, because for 100 years, films go through a very clear lifespan. They start remote, writers alone in their homes or with their writing partner in a coffee shop, completely alone.
Right.
At some point, you have lunches or dinners with a producer and trying to pitch him your ideas or her your ideas, right? Then maybe one of those ideas gets a little traction and you get a little bit of money. You set up a production office and you start hunting for a director, or you have meetings with the location scout. So there's 1 or 2 days a week you're going in there talking about the movie. The other 3 days you're doing script notes because you're trying to get Brad Pitt to star in it, but he wants to be taller. You know what I mean? So it is a hybrid thing of like everyone kind of comes together for a day or two, and goes out. And then you're on set, $125,000 a day. Everyone's here all day, all night, principal photography. You will have
for
no
a very
life.
Concentrated period of time.
Exactly.
Right?
For these number of months, it is beyond RTO. It is like Forget your home, you will be here. Then, at the end of the movie, you go back to hybrid where you have picture editors, sound editors, Foley artists working on it, and then finally you're remote. That pulse has existed for 100 years in film. It is very well respected. Here's what you do as a leader of these teams that are remote, hybrid, in-person, hybrid, remote. Here's how it's individual contributor, you deal with that. But in film, because it's been around so long, it's never been called like, well, this is the remote era of our film. This is the hybrid era of our film. But there are ways in which you do that. And those, I thought, overlaid beautifully onto what I was doing, which was running a small company in the modern world. And as modern work has evolved, it is not that it is this binary, you must be in the office, you must not be in the office, but it is like another color has been added to our palette of saying like, oh, there is some kind of really great work where people thrive being remote or hybrid. It doesn't have to be we're all sitting under fluorescent lights next to the fax machine, waiting for our boss to walk by and ask about our TPS report. And I love the movie Office Space, so don't impugn it, okay? So that was what was interesting to me. And that's what I have to share a lot is like, what are the lessons from film that overlay beautifully onto modern work? That principle about productivity of even if you work from your home, have a dedicated place where your mind settles into, oh, this is where I focus, this is where I do the work. So you're not working from bed, you don't have your laptop
and work out where that is. And it could be, it's different for everybody, right?
Wherever it is, but have that place where you just immediately you set into, okay, this is the workplace. When we were doing Independence Day, the director, producer, writers, they had a lucky house that they'd rented in Puerto Vallarta a number of times as they were writing, right?
Yeah.
And we went into the next movie and Roland had spoken to his assistant and said, hey, go rent us the house. We need it for like 2 months to go and get it in our place. And they had this great room there. They loved the light. And it was for them, it was their zone, right?
Yeah,
Help get it to flow.
Right.
And that vacation home had been rented. And he was like, it was like this hue and cry around the office going, oh my God, there'll be no next movie. They don't have their place. And Roland turned to his attorney, John Deemer, and was like, go buy the house. And like the next week,
Hollywood.
They had purchased the house, exactly, and they were headed down there. And whoever was renting it did not rent it that next week, right? Whatever works for you, but it is that sense of like, one principle of getting into flow is set your environment up properly.
One of the elements I think that is so interesting about the Hollywood production model is because it is so concentrated and involves so much money. It's not a sort of ongoing concern where, it's an average week, that you have to find that flow. You have to try and find out what works. And you really focus on like, where is it that I have done my best work and set myself up or prepared?
I love the stakes are so high. It is so extreme.
Right.
You really need to get it right. It is not a low stakes kind of gamble. Yep.
Are there any other particular things that when you're coming together, you're building up and preparing for the transition from fully remote to hybrid and then in person? Because you've got a lot of characters, some super creatives to super practical, functional, logistical, the director's assistant, the production assistant. Like there are some people who are so focused on getting this stuff done and they make all these crazy things come together. How does one prepare for that? Scaling up companies from small, from sort of very startup to the next phases, 12 people to 50 people, 100 people, and then beyond. What are some of the learnings that maybe could help people during those transition phases?
Well, let me give you two answers to that question, but this is more true in film, which is you have essentially a bifurcation or a decomposition of that leader profile, that manager, great leader profile, into two pieces in film, because you have the inspirational producer.
Right.
You have the director sometimes who has that, I have a vision. We're going to climb Everest. We're going to do this thing. It's going to look like this. Right? Yeah. But then you also have the line producer who is like, Sophie, listen, tomorrow at 6 a.m., I need you at the Scout. We need to, here are the 4 questions. We know, is there power at this location? Right? So you have that kind of decomposed into two different roles. And it works in that regard because you do have one person who's like putting your eyes on the horizon going, that is where we're going. Another person who's like, look down, don't step in that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
However, maybe the more applicable answer is this, is that because in film, like you said, it is a very high stakes gamble. Unless you're making a tiny little indie film, there are absolutely some lessons from that. For example, and you do read, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi's book on flow, when you read Clear and Newport and these guys, one of the things that struck me reading about a dozen of those top books is they're very common principles. If you really read them all, you kind of go, I feel like there are about 6 things I need to do, right? And I can apply any of these methodologies, but it's kind of the same things. So you do see that in film. Feedback, which Mihai talks about in Flow. You need, there are a number of constituent, sort of conditions precedent to help you get into flow. But there is that thing of like, you need to have some sort of feedback coming back to you going like, okay, what I'm doing was meaningful. It was done correctly. Right.
Yeah.
And same thing when you read, Newport, read a bunch of the other guys is, and girls, it is, hey, how do I know what I did? How does that reinforce me to get better tomorrow?
Yeah.
And whomever you want to follow, the common concept of if you get 1% better every night, compounding, that is a huge deal. It sounds like nothing, but
that's a lot.
So
compounding
in the early stages of a production or a TV show, you start assembling people, the writers that are going to create this of the different levels. The ones that get producer titles, ones that are writer titles, but they're creating. Once you get in production, you have it at the end of the day, like, hey man, how did we do? And your first AD or your line producer is like, we got these shots, we didn't make this. Tomorrow, this is our goal. And you just continually measure every night. You're like, hey man, we had to do a page and 7/8 today in order to make an 80-day schedule. We did a page and a half. What are we going to do to make that up? And by the way, it's going to rain tomorrow. So we have to go to a cover set, and that sort of like agility and the instant feedback is really important.
It still has to allow that creative, the artistic genius, which is going to make the movie work or not, or the TV show work or not. During that intense period of shooting, that there is that constant or very, very frequent return to what do we have to adjust for tomorrow?
Yes.
So in
How
that
did
project,
we do today?
Within the we're still being creative, we're still being innovative, and yet we also have to have this very tight framework that we keep improving upon. Really interesting.
Everyone joke. It's not called show art. It's not called show friendship. It's called show business. Today, we have $125,000 to get the scene where Iron Man jumps off the building, blah, 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 and the CG guys. Okay, so you have that. It is show business. There is absolutely an application of metrics to that. Hey, today we have 17 shots that cover 1.2, 1.25 pages. We have to get through this. By the way, tomorrow we lose, Gwyneth, she has to go do a commercial for Goop or something. What I mean? Like there is a very, very, very clear set of metrics of like, it is 2 p.m. We need to be here, right? Sunset is at 6:40. It's not going to change if we feel creative with sunset. Magic hour is this time. So there is that. But here's another very different thing. Let's pause, clear our minds, right? There is also the creative process. And I'll tell you, this is a lesson I learned when I was 19 or 20. Remember I said I was working at an ad agency that did trailers for movies, things like that, right? So this is like senior year. And this was kind of like my half step into film. 2 guys owned the agency, fantastic guys. One of them became like a big brother to me. Sadly, he has passed on. The other was friendly to me and we're still friends, but we were not like close friends. So he comes to my office. And at that time, I was running the writer-director department, which means we would get rough cuts of movies in. This movie's coming out Christmas from Warner Brothers. It's a rom-com. It's going to have Julia in it and, kind of sell it like a Julia rom-com kind of thing, right? So we did largely Warner Brothers and Buena Vista, which is Disney. And so what I was responsible for is when we would get movies in, I would assign them, go, oh, Sophie, you did an amazing job with that drama last year that won the Academy Award. They would love for you. You do this, right? Okay. So he comes to my office, Jeff does. And my office, I mean, tiny desk in a closet, right? Okay. And he's like, Stevie, so Bart. And I was like, Bart, there's a guy in the vault, Bart, like the guy who runs the tapes around Hollywood and delivers film and stuff. He goes, yeah. I was like, yeah, no, seems nice. I don't know him that well, but yeah, okay. He goes, you ever give Bart a movie? And I was like, Bart the runner, Bart the guy who delivers. Are we talking about the same Bart? He's like, yeah. I was like, I don't know where you're going with this, but you're the boss. He's like, I just have a sense about him. I think you should give him a movie. And I was like, you know what? You've been doing this for 20 years. I'm 20 years old.
Right.
You're the boss. Done. So I called Bart in that afternoon and I was like, hey man, listen, here's a movie. I pulled like a Warner Brothers B title that had like a month deadline. So we had in case after a week he's like, I can't do this, I could give it to a pro like Sophie and be like, Sophie, just bang this out, right?
Yeah.
So I give him this. I gave him a couple trailers, like, here's similar kinds of movie trailers. Maybe they're a good new prototype or a template for you.
Yeah.
Take it home. 2 days later, Jeff comes to my office. Stevie. Yes, Jeff. How's Bart doing? I'm like, I don't know. I just gave him the movie 2 nights ago. I didn't want to stress him out. Like Monday, I'll probably check in with him and be like, how you doing, man? Da, 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 right? And he goes, okay, fair enough. So what else you give him? I was like, Jeff, he's never written a trailer in his life. He was delivering tapes 2 days ago. Like I didn't get it. I didn't want to stress him out. And he goes, Stevie, I'm going to teach you something today. Okay. He goes, it's always about the other thing. I was like,
okay.
Tell me exactly what you mean. He's like, here's the deal. You give Bart one thing to work on. He's going to focus on that. And the part of his brain that actually does the interesting stuff is going to be completely shut down because he's going to be just like sweats coming down his little temples trying to please you on this thing. He's like, you have to give him another thing to think about, because when he's thinking about the other thing is when he's going to have that weird, well, what about peanut butter and chocolate? Peanut butter and chocolate might be interesting. And he's going to come up with Reese's Pieces. He's never going to do it creatively if you give him one thing. And you have to understand that about creativity. Can I tell you, 20 years later, I've seen that true of writers in film, writers in TV. It was a invaluable lesson that Jeff gave me when I was still a senior in college, and completely true.
Wow. So
very different than the instant, every metric, every night, all the time, we're measuring, do we get through 1.7, 1 7/8 pages today?
And Bart, what are his trailers like? Were they good?
Bart actually went on to become a big writer. He got into television, and he was writing on-air promotion. So doing essentially the commercials for TV shows, and had a fantastic career doing that. Jeff was right.
That.
He had a great instinct for it. And Jeff is still directing.
Absolutely fascinating to be thinking about all these different phases and what we need to be doing and how we sort of set up these frameworks and think about creativity as well as logistics. Right at the beginning of the pandemic, you are working at a company called Centered.
Yeah.
What content? You were the chief content officer, which is a very different type of role.
Centered was a buddy of mine who had an idea about doing a to-do list app, and asked me if I would help him with that. So I did. He had a baby, and he's like, I got to go get a real job, sort of tapped out. And I said, actually, all the lessons that I've learned, what I would like to do is I'd like to buy the code base of this to-do list sort of app.
Okay.
And I really think what it's about is applying a lot of the lessons from film, which are simple. I mean, there is so much writing about how you encourage deep work. And that's what I wanted to do with the Sukha company. And that's why I named it. There's a great story about why I named it that, because it's really about this sense of how do we enable people to do the great thing they're capable of. And that is my goal.
You were doing that for 3 years before you launched Sukha. And so I'd like to, just that trajectory as you're then honing your idea and then launch. Well, the pandemic obviously was very meaningful to you in terms of crystallizing, I would imagine, the idea
really
and
was.
what it was that you needed, that you wanted to launch.
Yeah. So this is what I came to believe, and the pandemic, as it did for many people, really helped crystallize my ideas. That's sort of like the pressure creates the diamond sort of thing.
Yeah.
And it was in looking at the way in which the world was changing, as you would say, modern work evolved. There was a forced evolution, a quantum sort of step forward of like, okay, how is this going to work? And suddenly hybrid work and remote work and these things were another color on the palette of corporations to go, you know what, maybe, like, I'll tell you, in my platform, the 3 biggest cohorts of members are engineers, designers, and writers. They're all college educated. They all have knowledge work to do. And they could do it a couple hours a day in a deep focus state and accomplish what they would in more hours. And to create does not necessarily just mean to paint. Like, you can create code, you can create a blog post. You know what I mean? Like,
and businesses. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes a creator seems to have been co-opted as a word for YouTubers. You know what I mean?
Well, I now think about creator as a word that I would like to use to replace employee or worker, because everything that we're doing
That's super
is
cool.
creating. And I think that idea of co-creating also, for me, I like the fact that when we have a team of, particularly across generations or any kind of group of people who come from very different contexts, we can all co-create. And I do find that a very compelling phrase.
That concept is very powerful.
Yeah, it's very compelling in terms of how we need to be thinking about ourselves and each other.
Yes, and I'll tell you this, that some of those crystallizations from the pressure, I'll tell you one, because again, remember, I had 2 failed companies and I wrote to myself, you need to be less arrogant. You need to listen and you need to talk to members. I do a lot of that the past few years, right? And I'll tell you what is interesting is there is a very common problem that not everyone talks about. People are often very focused on the distractions or how do I focus or social media is stealing my life, right? I will tell you the number one problem when you actually dig down with, you're like, well, why is that hard? Well, what is the hardest part? Why is that? It's the cold start. And it sounds so simplistic, which is, I can't tell you the number of members who have said to me, in the morning, I go to my workstation at home, I go to my office, my home office, and I know I need to start, and it's whatever time, 8 a.m., 9 a.m., whatever time you want to start. And I procrastinate. Well, why do you procrastinate today? And it boils down to a sense of overwhelm, which is very common with, I look at my task list, there's 17 things on my task, I'm not going to accomplish this. There's no way I'm going to get through this. Or it is, I look at my first task. It's insane. Write the book. I'm not going to be able to write the book. You know what I mean? I'm serious. But
that blank sheet of paper is very is very daunting.
Yes. And there are great things that have been written about how to get over this. So what I did, like in Sukha, is you have a smart assistant who greets you every morning and looks at your task list with you to say, you know what? I'm only going to show you the top 3. We're going to hide everything else. Choose what are your top 3. And by the way, goes through there and says like, you know what, Sophie, it's probably not realistic that you're going to get done, write the book today. But what if we said, outline chapter 1? Is that something you could do in 45 minutes? And you're like, yeah, I could.
So the app can actually break down that task without
and it
necessarily.
helps you break down the task. We
nice.
Look at it, and I'll tell you, this is true for me, and I've found it's true for other people, is there's one school of thought, which is eat the frog, the Mark Twain thing, or eat the elephant, which is like, start with your hardest, your most important task, get it done. Right? Absolutely works for some people.
Yep.
I find that the thing works for me is doing 1 or 2 things that build my momentum. So I go, oh my God, I got that done in 20 minutes. Oh, I returned my emails that I've been lingering on. And then the second or third thing is hey man, go write the outline for chapter 1. And I'm like, I got like my momentum is just like, I'm knocking stuff.
A brain working.
It really is. That was something that we trained your smart assistant to do in the Sukha, is to say, hey, I'm getting to know you. Oh, you're one of those people that works best if you do a couple small things and build in. Or you're someone who's just like, give me the hard thing right now. I want to get it done by 10. And then the rest of the day is coasting.
Helps you understand yourself. Because I think one of the things that people were able to do during the pandemic is being forced in particular contrived situations. They realized that the office wasn't the only place they could be productive, and learning more about, okay, so this type of work I do better in this type of situation and these conditions. And so that self-learning, particularly related to work and deep work and flow.
I will tell you my model. I read this. This is not someone I know personally, but I read this and I had it screenshotted in my phone, circled it in green, saved it. It was a tech writer who said, I remember when I was little, I would go to my grandmother and grandfather's house on the weekend and would have breakfast. My grandmother would make pancakes, whatever, and we'd sit at the table. And right before my grandmother would reach for the butter, my grandfather would take the butter and slide it over to her. And he said, there was not a word exchanged. I have always wanted to have a relationship with technology like that. That is what I aspire to. That is how I'm trying to create the Sukha, where their smart assistant says, Sophie, on Tuesdays, you know what? You do your best work when you listen to this playlist. And I know you didn't finish your blog post yesterday, so why don't we knock that out first, because you'll feel great. And by the way, you always underestimate the amount of time to clear out your inbox. So how about we budget an hour today? And you're like,
yes.
Thank you.
Right.
One of the things I learned, Ron Bass, who was a famous screenwriter, he also blocked that time from when he woke up until about 9 a.m., where he wouldn't even talk to his wife or his children. And he said, I need to go use this time to write, because as soon as I start talking to you, I can't hear my characters' voices in my head.
Oh, interesting.
So he would write dialogue early in the morning, and he said, I will talk to not my agent, not my
Right.
wife. I will get up, go quietly in my little slippers
Yeah.
to my office and write. He said, once I've gotten there, I can write plot stuff later in the day. But he said, as soon as someone's spoken to me, I lose the ability to hear my characters' voices.
It's not just this intelligent assistant in that way. It's also to do with where people are working and taking on board that Hollywood production, remote, hybrid, all those different aspects of combinations. How does that play into how you're trying to help people be productive, be effective in whatever they're doing and wherever they're working?
Okay, so instead of reading the top 12 books on productivity, you can skip that. Mm-hmm. We try to, as I told you, distill down those core concepts and build that into a platform with one button that you get the benefits of that, however that can be applicable, which means as simple as there are certain kinds of music that scientifically have been shown to help you get into flow.
Okay.
And I'm to tell you, everyone knows someone who's an outlier. Like, oh, my brother can only listen to like hardcore, whatever. So they're outliers. I'm talking about the 80%, and it is like 60 to 90 beats per minute. It is certain key signatures. It's non-vocal. It's melodic.
Right.
We have 1,000 hours. I have a bunch of friends who are film composers who have time on their hands. We have like 1,000 hours of this melodic 60, 90 beats per minute, sort of music. Nice. And then we had some members who said, actually, you know what? One member was like, I used to always write up at this cabin. She's a writer. She actually wrote her book using Sukha. There's this cabin up in where she used to be in Canada. And it was so beautiful with the window open, hearing the birds and the little lapping of the lake. We got a 2-hour recording of that. And now we have a bunch of naturescapes. Like our sound engineer was in Kathmandu, recorded 2 hours of rain. So we have like Himalayan dream rain. We got a Japanese stream.
Real Himalayan. So hang on a second. I'm very interested that you actually go get the nature, get the actual real thing, rather than creating.
We did not have the budget to fly him to Kathmandu, but he was in Kathmandu and he's like, while I was there, it was raining. It was so cool. I stuck the microphone and recorded 2 hours. There's 2 hours of rain in the Himalayas.
So you say this is real rain.
Yeah,
real
there's a Japanese stream.
What about?
Like, where are you going this year? Cyprus. Record some surf. We have Cyprus surf.
Ooh, I love the sound of water actually, and surf is great.
Yep.
For someone who is like you, growing a company, you've got somebody who's got a tech company. They're 100, 200, 300 employees. They need to find their flow in the midst, wherever they're working with a small team, at HQ or the core team, other people are distributed. What are the things that you think are, what have you put into the app that can help somebody who has an incredibly varied assortment of tasks and stresses as well that they have to be focusing on every day?
We encourage a number of practices. So there is set aside focus time, right? As I think Cal Newport has written a bunch of articles around.
Sure.
When you interrupt your flow, it takes you up to maybe 22 minutes to get back from a distraction. There's no such thing as multitasking. There is monotasking, where you burn your brain context switching and trying to load the context for the next thing. So what we built in is we said, you know what, with one button, we want to give you beautiful music. We give you a Pomodoro timer. We absolutely believe that there is the value in breaks. I think Huberman did a great podcast where he talked about, after 90 minutes, it's not just Pomodoro, take a 5-minute break after 25, but it's also your brain fuel, your brain glucose starts to get depleted. So, for example, on our platform, we don't encourage you to work more than 2 hours at a time. After 2 hours, you get points for going for a walk, for going to have a glass of water. We offer stretching exercises or breathing and meditation, because it's like, do something to reset and be healthy, even if it's just stand up for 5 minutes.
Right. I thought it was 45 minutes. So you go for the 2 hours.
At the end of 2 hours, because you're supposedly your levels kind of peak at 90 minutes, and then it's a real depletion after that.
All right.
So we kind of draw the line at 2 hours. Even like when we were talking about your line producer, giving you feedback, going, hey guys, let's get the crew together. Listen, today we didn't make our day, right? Sort of thing.
Yes.
So we do the exact same thing. You have a live productivity score where you can see, like, how did I do? Oh, why did it go down here? Oh, that's when I opened that YouTube video, and then I watched the other YouTube video. Okay. And your smart assistant, when you open the next YouTube tomorrow, will be like, hey, Sophie, just to remind you, yesterday you lost 20 minutes because you went to watch that one video. Do you want to, I can make a reminder for you to watch this later and not interrupt your flow time. Do you want to do that? And you're like, actually, thank you. So there's that thing of like the music, the timers, the task list. It's
not
all tied
only
together.
learning, but helping you learn about yourself. And
Bingo.
Yeah.
Right.
So, okay. So therefore,
you can only be as good as you want to be. We're just tools to help you be great, to do something that you're capable of. You have inside you something great. If we can help you get it out, that's why I'm here.
And how does it help me? So I'm thinking about, okay, so I'm in a company, there's so much going on. I'm running a team. I need to try and make the team work well together and also help each person maximize their own flow, their performance. How is this tool useful to be able to, on the team basis, to be maximizing everybody's performance?
It is super useful for people who have to do knowledge work. So when we talk a lot about writing code, writing in general, copywriting, blogs, books, designing, we have a lot of UI, UX designers, graphic designers, people like that. We also have accountants and attorneys, which I don't talk about a lot, but they have several hours a day of knowledge work. I can do this in 6 hours. I can do it in 3. And for the teams, like we've been approached by engineering managers who said, hey man, 3 of my people use this thing you do and I tried it and it seems cool. Could I get all 15 because we're all remote? I've got developers all over North America or Latin America. Could I set up a private group where we can see each other? Like you have the opportunity in Sukha, if you want, you don't have to do this, but if you want, you can turn your camera and 6 times a minute, it'll take a little snapshot so that the people in your group can sort of see you and be like, it feels warm. It feels like you're not alone. And I think community and that sense of humanness is really important.
Yep.
And there's also a lot of research behind it. If you know social facilitation theory, there's a measurable bump in your output when you can see someone else working. You're like, oh, we're in this together. And you know that you can be seen.
Yeah.
And one of our members said this to me. She said, I was asking her about, what do you think about this feature? What do you think? We talked about the community thing, which we call the coffee shop, right? Because it's just like you walk in a coffee shop, you don't talk to everyone.
Yeah.
But like there's a famous coffee shop, the Coffee Bean on across from the Directors Guild, but a lot of writers write. They don't all chat. But you walk in there and it feels like a clubhouse of people who are all trying to write the next great script, and it's energetic, right?
And competitive. That's competitive writing.
It's competitive, but it's also like we're all writers. This is our like clubhouse, right? I loved that feeling. I want to evoke that coffee shop, which is why we call it the coffee shop. She said, hey, listen, I think this is how I would explain what that is. I can go to Nike and go buy a pair of running shoes. They sell me a left shoe, a right shoe. I can put them on my feet. I can go for a run. Done. Like it works.
Right.
100 million people around the world belong to the Nike Run Club because when you run with other people, you run further, you run faster, you're more accountable.
Right.
And the days that one of your friends is like kind of dragging and you like pull them up, you go, come on, Soph, let's do this. You're there for her. And the day that you're dragging, your friends are there for you. Yeah. She said, that's the power of community. And that's why I use a coffee shop. And I was like more eloquent than I put it. And I was like, can I use that story? She's like, yes.
So I think one of the challenges in how we need to be working now is the bar has been raised. We all need to be working much more closely together. We need to understand that much more about ourselves first. I talk about a lot about empathy, but empathy starts with me. Yeah. And then obviously if somebody else goes, well, what has your assistant said to you? And then we can share some of those things and then connect through those visualizations that happen. Yeah. So that ability to help people understand and really start to hone and refine how they're working individually and together, I think is super, super powerful. For leaders of organizations, senior executives of people who are growing, like you, growing a technology company.
Yes.
In this extraordinary time of technological change and AI, which I do see as really forcing people to work differently and design how they're working in order to break down tasks and do them more effectively and efficiently. What is your advice to them? Obviously thinking so much about what you've developed at Sukha, but through all your tech, CGI, and Hollywood production, what are some of a couple of thoughts that could sort of give some tips?
Thoughts. Number one, I'll tell you as a short aside, I had a horrible name picked out for our company. Okay. I want to tell you how bad it was, right? So Laura and I got married 3 years ago, and And I said to Laura, I said, man, I've been wrestling with this thing and I just fail. I know it's bad. Like, I don't even want to tell you what the current idea in my head is for this. I do a couple Zooms the first day or two with some of our power members and just ask them, like, what's your favorite thing about what do you like about what we do, right? And maybe that'll go in there and just like be the seed of like, oh, what you call it, right?
Okay.
So I asked a lot of dumb questions of them. I was like, can I just have 10 minutes of your time?
Yeah.
Just one. Do you like the music? Do you like the timers? Do you like the assistant? How do you like the scoring? Right? It didn't really go anywhere. Third person I was talking to, this guy, we did our 8 minutes and I did the polite wrap up. Thank you so much for your time. It really is helpful for me. Right? And he said, Stephen, you didn't ask the right question.
Okay.
Like, okay. What's the right question? He said, you should ask me why I pay you.
Ooh.
And I was like,
okay.
I would not have been that bold. You're okay. That's a good question, but I'm not that guy who'd be like, why do you pay me? Right? He's like, ask me. I was like, okay, why do you pay me? He said, at 3:00, I can be playing with my kids, or at 6:00, I can be, where the fuck did the day go? He's like, the difference is, did I open Sukha that morning? He said, I pay you because my kids are 2 and 4 and they're never going to be this age again. And I want to have that time with them. And I was like,
wow.
Okay.
That gave me goosebumps. Oh my God.
So, of course, Laura and I have dinner. I'm like, oh my God, I talked to this guy. He had this great idea. It was so cool. This whole like excited thing. And Laura's like, okay, it's really cool. And we're brushing our teeth and going to bed. And Laura said, I'll tell you what, the reason you are stuck on this, like, productivity app 14, focus mate 12, like all these like terrible things is, she's like, I think you're focused on the path. You're trying to describe the path. And she said, well, that guy told you is the goal is happiness. Yeah. Mm. And that's actually what you're trying to do. And these things are, they'll evolve. In a year, you'll have different tools and new music, and you're trying to describe that. She's like, that's what it is. And she said, in yoga, obviously there's a lot of Sanskrit words that you hear when you do yoga, prana.
Yeah.
She's like, Sukha is that self-fulfillment. It is that happiness from doing something that you're good at and you're proud of. She's like, that's actually, I think, what you're talking about. I was like, done. We're going to call the company the Happiness Company. And I named it the Sukha Company because I want people to get that place of like, I feel great at this. And by the way, it's 3:00. I'm playing with my kids. And I'm having a son this year. And I am super excited at 3:00 to be like, well, let's go do something. What do you want to do? That is ultimately what I want. And I think what's interesting is in talking to like engineering managers who are the number one people who reach out to say, can I set up a group? Is the thing that they really want to control is retention. Because they're like, I think I've hired well. I think people can be productive. I can make them a little, more productive, but it's not that. It's that the people I work with are talented and they get poached. And they approach from the point of view of like, if I can make this feel like a happy, cohesive team, it will reduce churn because it is very expensive to lose someone and have to source a new person, train them, onboard, And that was interesting because it plays right into what Laura said of like, that's what this is about, is if you feel self-fulfilled and happy, if you're enabled to do great work, you want to stay there.
Yep.
And I honestly would have stayed at DreamWorks. Had I known what Fox would have been like, I would have stayed at DreamWorks for less money. But that...
Interesting.
You understand what I'm saying?
I totally do. Stephen, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
So interesting. All the different things that you're sharing about this extraordinary journey that you are part of the way on. And I cannot wait to see and hear about all the other things that you're doing and how many people, many updates to come. And the Sukha along the way and part of the way and as much as possible for everybody. So thank you very much for your time.
Toby, thank you for having me. I hope this has been helpful.
Thanks again so much to Stephen Puri, founder and CEO of the Sukha Company. You can find out more about Stephen on LinkedIn, as well as go to the Sukha Company's website at thesukha.co, THESUKHA.co. Immediate action tip. Cultivating self-fulfilled, cohesive teams reduces churn. If people are enabled to do great work, they want to stay. If you are interested in more insights and information relevant for your company, sign up for one of my new executive coaching sessions. I'm now offering select one-on-one times for you to get valuable insights, solutions to your top priorities, and answer your most pressing questions. Whether that's about leading multi-generational teams, managing distributed workers, or how to scale rapidly in the modern work environment. If you like this episode, please share it with a friend. You can also write a quick review wherever you listen. For more relevant, curated, useful articles, research, and information, sign up for my Work in Progress newsletter at flexos.work. Thanks for listening and watching. Until next time.